I'm 42, divorced, and a full-time working mom. My 15-year-old son, Evan, is in his sophomore year of high school, and like most teens, he's developed a knack for pushing every single one of my buttons. Lately, though, he's been slipping in school, particularly in English. His teacher, Ms. Rowland, had emailed me a few times with updates, but nothing seemed too alarming until 2 weeks ago when she asked if I could come in for an in-person parent conference. She was polite, even apologetic for the short notice, but said she preferred to talk face-to-face. That already felt strange. I'd been to a million school meetings over the years, but they were always either virtual or quick hallway chats. Still, I agreed. She asked if I could swing by after school hours since she'd be staying late to grade papers anyway. I figured fine, I'd pop in after work, clear the air, and get a handle on whatever Evan was up to. So I showed up. It was almost 5:30 p.m. The building was nearly empty, and the air had that weird quiet hum that only schools have after hours. Her classroom was tucked away near the end of the second-floor hallway. The lights inside were on, and I could see her through the door, arranging some folders on her desk. She smiled warmly when I stepped in and offered me a seat like we were old friends catching up over coffee. That's when it started to feel off. Because there were no papers about Evan on her desk. No grade reports, no red-marked essays, no laptop open to the school portal. Just a single bottle of sparkling water and 2 glasses. She closed the door behind me. Then she locked it. The click of that lock echoed louder than it should have. I heard it, but I tried to play it off. Maybe it was for privacy. Maybe it was standard for parent-teacher meetings now. Maybe I was overthinking. But something about it made my stomach tighten just a little. She sat down across from me, folded her hands, and smiled too warmly. And the first thing out of her mouth wasn't about Evan's grades. She asked me how I was holding up. Not in a generic small-talk way. More like she actually meant it. Like she knew something. She brought up my divorce, casually dropping details I had definitely never shared with the school. Mentioned how hard it must be managing everything on my own, full-time job, single parenthood, teenage boy acting out. I froze for a second, trying to figure out how much she knew and how. Then she mentioned Evan's father, by name. Said she'd seen him at a school event once but he didn't seem very present. That was true, but how would she even remember that? It was almost a year ago. My ex hadn't shown his face since. And even if she did notice him, what teacher talks to a parent like that? I laughed it off nervously and steered the conversation back to Evan. I asked about his grades, his behavior, if he was being disrespectful in class. She waved it off. Said he was going through something but insisted he was sweet underneath. Then she added, almost like an afterthought, that he reminded her of someone she used to know. And then she looked me dead in the eye and said, I think he gets a lot of that sensitivity from you. It didn't sound like a compliment. She got up suddenly and walked over to a cabinet behind her desk. I assumed she was grabbing some files or maybe a printed grade sheet, but no, she came back with a photo. At first, I thought it was a class photo or maybe something Evan had drawn. But when she handed it to me, I didn't even know what I was looking at. It was a blurry image, clearly taken with a phone camera. Grainy, dim. But unmistakably from inside a car. My car. There was Evan in the back seat, asleep, slumped against the window. And in the front passenger seat, was me. My jaw went slack. My hand holding the photo trembled. I asked where she got it. She just tilted her head and smiled. She said she took it, weeks ago. That's when everything started to spin. She said she'd followed me once. Just once, out of curiosity, because she'd felt a connection when we emailed. She said I looked sad. Tired. Like I needed someone. I felt like I couldn't breathe. She wasn't apologetic. She didn't look embarrassed or ashamed. She looked calm. Like she genuinely believed this was okay. And then she said something I'll never forget. She said, I didn't ask you here because of Evan. I asked you here because I think we're in the same kind of pain. She reached across the desk and placed her hand on mine. And I couldn't move. For a second, I didn't know if I was frozen from shock or if some deeper instinct was kicking in, like my body was trying to protect me by disconnecting entirely. Her hand was still on mine, and it wasn't just a gentle, comforting touch. It was deliberate, possessive, like she was trying to anchor me there. I pulled my hand away. She didn't flinch. Just smiled again, this time a little tighter, like she'd expected that reaction and was willing to wait it out. Like she thought I'd come around once I understood her intentions. I stood up, suddenly very aware of how small the classroom felt. I told her I wasn't comfortable with this. That whatever she thought she knew about me or my life, it wasn't her place. I tried to keep my voice firm, but my throat was dry and every word scraped on the way out. She didn't stop smiling. She just leaned back in her chair like we were still having a normal conversation and said, "That's what they all say at first." My skin went cold. I backed toward the door and reached for the knob, but it was still locked. I fumbled with it for a second before realizing she had the key in her hand, resting casually on the edge of her desk. I asked her to unlock the door. She didn't move. Instead, she picked up the second glass of sparkling water, the one she'd poured when I arrived, and sipped from it like this was just another Tuesday evening. Then she said something that made my blood run even colder than before. She said, "He doesn't talk about you the way a son should. He's angry at you. He blames you. But he doesn't really know you, does he? Not like I do." I didn't understand what she meant at first, but then it clicked. This wasn't just about me. This was about Evan. She'd been watching him too. I asked her, again, to open the door. This time louder. Sharper. The kind of voice that says, "This ends now." But she didn't flinch. Instead, she leaned forward, folded her hands again, and calmly said, "He needs something stable. You can't give that to him right now." She picked up her phone from the desk and turned it toward me. It was unlocked, open to a video. A video of Evan. In our backyard. Talking to someone. Laughing. The angle was high, like it had been taken from the upstairs window of our neighbor's house or maybe even higher. I had no idea how she got it. I didn't want to know. I lunged for the phone. She let me take it. Almost like it was a test. I grabbed it, saw the file name, and my stomach dropped. It wasn't the only one. There were dozens of clips, all labeled with dates. All about Evan. Some labeled third period hallway. Others parking lot, locker, car pickup. That's when I stopped thinking about how weird she was. And started realizing something else entirely. This woman had been watching us for a long time. Too long. The edges of my vision blurred. My brain was racing, trying to keep up with everything I was seeing. The videos weren't just harmless little school moments, they were private. Personal. Things that shouldn't have been filmed, let alone saved. There was one clip that made my knees go weak. It was Evan sitting on the curb outside our house, alone. Head down. He looked upset. From the timestamp, it was the night after he and I had gotten into an argument about his phone. I'd taken it away after he failed to turn in 2 assignments. I remember him storming outside, slamming the door behind him. I thought he needed space. I let him cool off. But someone had been watching him. Someone had recorded that moment from across the street, zoomed in. I could hear faint audio, he was muttering to himself. And in the background, a familiar soft breathing. It wasn't just a recording. She had been there. Ms. Rowland had been outside my house. I looked up at her, horrified. She was still seated, perfectly calm, like this wasn't completely deranged. Like filming my son, my child, in his most vulnerable state was some kind of act of care. Like she thought I should be grateful. I demanded she unlock the door again, louder this time. My voice cracked, but I didn't care. She finally stood. But instead of going to the door, she walked over to a filing cabinet, opened the top drawer, and pulled out a small leather notebook. She held it out to me like it was some kind of offering. "I wrote things down," she said, so softly it made my skin crawl. Patterns. What he responds to. What shuts him down. What triggers his moods. You might not see it, but he's in pain. He needs someone to understand him. I didn't take the notebook. I couldn't even move. My legs felt cemented to the floor. My heart was racing so fast I could barely hear her over the pounding in my ears. She thought she was helping. That was the scariest part. In her mind, she wasn't doing anything wrong. She truly believed she had stepped into some savior role. That I was a mother failing her child, and she, this woman who had locked me in a classroom, stalked my home, and secretly recorded my son, was the one who could fix him. I grabbed the phone again and took pictures of the video thumbnails. I didn't care if she noticed. My fingers were shaking, but I kept snapping. Then I backed toward the door again. I said, as clearly and firmly as I could, that if she didn't let me out right now, I would scream. That I would go to the police. That she would never work in a school again. She didn't argue. She just sighed like I was disappointing her. Like a child who had failed to see the bigger picture. Then she reached into her cardigan pocket and tossed me the key. "You're making a mistake," she said. I didn't respond. I turned, unlocked the door, and walked out without another word. I didn't look back, but I could feel her watching me the entire way down the hallway. I don't remember walking to my car. I don't remember unlocking the doors, or starting the engine, or the drive home. All I know is I blinked, and I was parked in my driveway, hands gripping the steering wheel like I was afraid the whole world would tilt if I let go. Inside the house, everything was quiet. Evan was in his room, headphones on, gaming like nothing in the world was wrong. And for a split second, I envied that. That teenage tunnel vision, the ability to shut everything out with a screen and forget. But I couldn't forget. I couldn't even blink without seeing that woman's eyes, that notebook, those videos. I stood there in the living room for a long time, trying to decide what to do. Do I tell Evan? Do I go straight to the school? To the police? What if they don't believe me? What if she deletes everything before anyone gets involved? I needed evidence. I sat down, took out my phone, and opened the camera roll. The photos of her phone's gallery were all there, blurry, angled, but enough to prove she had recordings. I zoomed in on one file name, 11-7, back gate. That was just last week. And I remembered Evan mentioning he had detention that day. She must have filmed him walking out alone. That sealed it. This wasn't just a one-time thing. She'd been following him, obsessively. For months, maybe longer. Then I realized something else. If she had been following him, and by extension, me, how many other moments had she seen? I stood up and went to check the windows. Curtains closed. Doors locked. Still, the feeling of being watched clung to me like damp clothes. I checked the cameras. Thank God I had a basic home security system, but nothing seemed out of place. But something inside me told me this wasn't over. So I called someone I never thought I'd involve, my ex. He picked up after 2 rings, clearly surprised. I hadn't heard his voice in months, and it stirred up a lot more emotion than I expected. But I kept it short. I told him Evan's teacher had crossed some boundaries and that I needed help, not a lecture, not an argument, just help. He didn't ask for details, just said, "What do you need me to do?" Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was the hint of panic in my voice. Whatever the reason, he agreed to come over that night. While I waited, I double-checked everything again, locks, lights, front and backyard. Nothing looked tampered with. No signs of anyone watching. But still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had already seeped inside. Not physically. Mentally. She was in my head now. When my ex arrived, I showed him everything, the photos, the video thumbnails, the way she locked me in her classroom. I thought he'd say I was overreacting. That maybe she was just overinvested in Evan, that I should talk to the school board or something tame. But as he flipped through the pictures, his face changed. He went pale, quiet. Then he said something that chilled me more than anything else that night. He said, "This isn't the first time I've heard her name." I asked him what he meant. And that's when the pieces started to fall into place. My heart dropped. I asked him again, what did he mean it wasn't the first time he'd heard her name? And he just stood there, gripping my phone, like he was trying to decide how much to say. He looked like someone who'd just realized they were sitting on a live wire. Then he told me. About a month ago, he got a message request on Instagram. A new account. No profile picture. Just a vague username and a DM that read, "You should spend more time with your son. He needs a real father." He thought it was a scam. Deleted it. Blocked the user. Didn't give it another thought. Until a few days later, another message came through. Same type of account. This time, it said, "He's angry at you. He doesn't say it, but he hates that you left." It rattled him. But again, he ignored it. Then a third message. "He told me things about you. You should hear what he really thinks." That one got under his skin. He responded, asked who they were, how they knew Evan. No reply. Just a read receipt. Then nothing. He blocked that account too and moved on with his life. He never brought it up to me. Didn't think it was important. But now that he'd seen the photos and heard what happened tonight, it all came flooding back. He was sure it was her. It had to be. She'd reached out to him. Tried to manipulate him. Tried to wedge her way between us without ever showing her face. And God knows what else she'd been doing in the background. It made my skin crawl. She wasn't just watching Evan. She was studying all of us. I sat down hard on the couch, trying to breathe through the rising panic. If she'd been following him, filming him, contacting his father behind my back, what else had she done? Was she tracking us? I grabbed my laptop and pulled up the browser. Started typing frantically, her name, her school credentials, anything I could find. Her school profile was clean. Well-spoken. Volunteer work. Years of experience. No red flags. But then I did a reverse image search on her profile picture. Nothing came up, until I clicked on a link from a news archive from 6 years ago. It was a blurry photo from a local paper. A woman standing outside a courthouse. Same dark hair, same soft face, but her expression was different. Pale. Blank. The caption was short, but it said enough. Local woman questioned in ongoing custody case after allegations of harassment. No charges were filed. No details were listed. But the article confirmed what I had just started to suspect. She'd done this before. She had gotten close to another family. And it hadn't ended well. I looked at my ex, who was still sitting with the phone in his hands. He met my eyes, and for the first time in years, we didn't feel like exes. We felt like parents. Like two people who had to act now, or something terrible was going to happen. And in that moment, I realized something that made my blood go cold. I had left her classroom. But I hadn't left her world. I barely slept that night. Even after my ex left, promising to call the school in the morning and back me up however he could, I kept pacing the house like a caged animal. Every creak of the floor made me jump. I kept checking the windows, the door locks, the backyard, over and over, like it would stop the awful feeling creeping through me. Because something had shifted. It wasn't just about Evan's grades anymore. It wasn't even about that weird locked door meeting. It was about the slow, methodical way she had inserted herself into our lives. Quietly. Patiently. Like she was building a story in her head, one piece at a time, and we were just characters in it. By morning, I'd made a decision. I wasn't going to the school. I was going to the police. I showed them everything, the photos, the screenshots of the video thumbnails, the article I'd found from 6 years ago, even the messages my ex had gotten. At first, the officer looked skeptical, like maybe this was just a misunderstanding between a parent and a teacher. But the minute I mentioned the locked door and showed the photos of Evan from outside our house, something changed in his posture. He took it seriously. He asked for a formal statement. They said they couldn't arrest her without more, but they could open a file. They could contact the school and do a welfare check if they found it necessary. It wasn't everything I wanted, but it was a start. When I left the station, I sat in the parking lot for a long time, watching people come and go, wondering how many of them had ever found themselves in a situation like this, being quietly hunted by someone who wore a calm smile and called it concern. Back home, I tried to keep things normal for Evan. I didn't tell him everything, just that there'd been a boundary issue with his English teacher and that the school might call him to talk about it. He rolled his eyes, like it was just more adult drama, and went back to his game. He had no idea. He didn't know that someone had been watching him from the shadows, taking notes on his life, tracking his pain and using it as an excuse to get closer. That afternoon, I got the call from the school. The principal was tight-lipped, but I could tell he was rattled. He said Ms. Rowland had been placed on leave effective immediately while they reviewed my complaint. When I asked if that meant she wouldn't be near Evan, he hesitated, then said she wouldn't be allowed back on campus for the time being. That gave me a sliver of peace. For the first time in 2 days, I let myself breathe. But it didn't last long. Because 2 hours later, I got a message. Not an email. Not a phone call. Just a single manila envelope slid under my front door. No name. No return address. Inside was a handwritten note. Neat. Delicate. On lined paper that looked like it had been torn straight from a journal. And all it said was, "You still don't understand. I never needed to be at the school to see him. I've always been closer than you think." And taped to the back? A Polaroid. Of Evan. Sleeping. In his bed. In my house. I dropped the envelope. It slid across the floor like something toxic, something alive. My fingers were still shaking as I backed away, one step at a time, eyes glued to that photo like it might move if I blinked. Evan. In his room. His head tilted slightly to the side on the pillow. Blanket tangled at his feet. The soft blue glow from his computer monitor lit up the wall behind him, casting just enough light to make the image terrifyingly clear. This wasn't taken through a window. This wasn't zoomed from across the street. This photo was taken inside my house. I was in the room seconds later, bursting in, heart hammering. Evan was fine. Annoyed, confused, earbuds still in. He pulled one out and stared at me like I was insane. I didn't say a word. I just looked. At the windows. The vents. Every inch of his room. Nothing broken. Nothing obviously out of place. But the photo didn't lie. Someone had been in here. Watching him sleep. And we hadn't heard a damn thing. I went full lockdown. Every window in the house got a sensor. Every door had a chair against it. I unplugged the garage opener. Called the security company and paid for the full upgrade, even though the guy on the phone said it would take 48 hours to get everything installed. I didn't care. I needed it. Now. Then I called the detective assigned to the case. When I told him about the photo, his tone changed instantly. They were sending someone over. Tonight. I showed the officers everything when they arrived. The envelope. The note. The photo. They checked the house, top to bottom, every room, every vent, even the attic. No signs of forced entry. No hidden cameras. No unlocked doors. Nothing. It was like the photo had materialized out of nowhere. But we all knew it hadn't. One of the officers pulled me aside quietly, asked if there was any way Evan might have let someone in without realizing the danger. I told him no. I wanted to believe that. I needed to believe that. But a seed of doubt had been planted. Because what if? What if this whole thing wasn't just about me? What if she'd been working on Evan this whole time? She was his teacher. She had access to him every day. To his stories, his emotions, his frustrations with me. What if she'd used all of it, his teenage anger, his loneliness, as a way in? What if he did let her in? What if he trusted her? That night, I barely slept. I sat in the living room, lights off, clutching a kitchen knife like it was going to fix anything. I kept hearing phantom creaks, whispers that weren't there. Every shadow looked like her face. Every gust of wind against the windows made me flinch. At some point, maybe around 3 a.m., I finally drifted off on the couch. When I woke up, my phone had a new message. No number. No name. Just a single image. It was another Polaroid. This time of me. Asleep. On the couch. Knife still in hand. My scream woke Evan. The second I saw that photo on my phone, me curled up on the couch, eyes shut, knife still clutched like a child's toy, I felt something inside me snap. Not fear. Not even anger. Just violation. A deep, skin-crawling realization that this person wasn't just watching us anymore. She was here. Not last week. Not from afar. Last night. In my home. Inches from me while I slept. Evan came stumbling out of his room, rubbing his eyes, confused and groggy, until he saw my face. He asked what was wrong. I couldn't even speak. I just showed him the photo. He froze. His eyes scanned the image, then darted around the room like maybe she was still hiding in the shadows. That moment, seeing him like that, shaken and small, the way kids only get when they realize their parents are scared too, that broke something in me. I called the police again. Didn't care that I'd already filed a report. Didn't care that they told me an officer would be in touch today. I told them what happened and demanded someone come now. They did. They searched again. Same result, no signs of entry. No prints. No stray fibers. No digital footprints. Whoever she was careful. Calculated. She was good at this. The detective asked if I had enemies. Anyone who'd want to scare me, not just Evan's teacher. I laughed, half out of panic, half out of disbelief. There was no one else. She was the only one obsessed enough. And now she'd escalated. She didn't want to just insert herself into our lives. She wanted control. She wanted to replace me. I asked the detective point blank, why wasn't she arrested yet? Why was she still out there? He said the words I feared most, because so far, she hasn't technically broken any laws. Trespassing? No proof. Harassment? Maybe. But stalking requires a very specific legal threshold. And unless I had video of her entering the house or caught her in the act, there was nothing they could do yet. She knew that. She was counting on that. The system was protecting her. I looked at Evan, sitting on the floor now, curled up near the window, hoodie pulled tight over his head. And it hit me, this wasn't just a creepy obsession anymore. It was trauma. For both of us. We were living in it now. Breathing it in every hour of the day. So I made a choice. I packed our bags. I booked us a hotel under a different name. Used a friend's card. I didn't even tell Evan where we were going. Just that we needed space. He didn't argue. That scared me more than if he had. As we drove out of the neighborhood, I made one final stop. I dropped an envelope in my lawyer's mailbox. Inside, all the photos. The videos. The screenshots. The notes. Everything. I added a post-it that read, if anything happens to me or Evan, start here. Paranoia? Maybe. But I didn't feel crazy anymore. I felt hunted. As we pulled into the hotel parking lot that night, Evan finally asked me something. He said, Mom, are you sure this is just a teacher? I didn't answer. Because for the first time, I wasn't sure. At all. We stayed in that hotel for 3 days. 3 days of bland beige walls, takeout dinners, and keeping the blinds shut even on the top floor. I barely slept. I kept my phone on silent but checked it every few minutes, convinced another message would appear, another photo, another quiet reminder that she still had eyes on us. But nothing came. And that silence, it was worse than the noise. Because it meant something was coming. On the 4th morning, I got a call. Not from the police. Not from the school. From an unknown number. I let it ring. Once. Twice. On the 3rd, I answered. But no one spoke. All I heard was breathing. Slow. Controlled. Waiting. Then a voice I recognized, too soft to be threatening, said, "He misses his routine. You shouldn't have taken him away." I hung up so hard I nearly cracked the screen. My hands were trembling again. Evan saw my face and didn't ask a thing, just started putting on his shoes. We were done hiding. I needed this to end. So I went back. Not home, to her house. I'd done the digging while we were gone. Pulled her address from a background search site using her full name and teaching credentials. It was risky. Reckless, even. But I didn't care. The fear had curdled into something sharp, cold, final. She lived alone. A small house on a dead-end street, blinds drawn tight. The kind of place where nothing ever happened and no one ever asked questions. My heart pounded the second I pulled up, but I forced myself out of the car and walked straight to her front porch. There was a camera above the door. Of course there was. I didn't knock. I stared right at the lens and said, loud enough to carry, "I know everything. I have the photos, the videos, the notes. I know about the other family. I know about the custody case. I've talked to the police, and now I'm going to the press. You come near my son again, I will destroy you in every way that matters. And if you ever set foot on our street, I will make sure you spend the rest of your life behind bars. I am not afraid of you anymore." I turned and walked back to the car. I didn't look back. That was 2 weeks ago. Since then, no more envelopes. No photos. No calls. The school confirmed she'd resigned quietly for personal reasons. The police said they were still building a case, but off the record? They believed me now. Fully. She'd gone too far. She crossed a line that couldn't be erased. Evan's getting better. Slowly. He still keeps his bedroom light on at night. I still check the locks 5 times before bed. But we're talking again. Really talking. And every night before he goes to sleep, he says goodnight and waits for me to answer. Just a small thing, but I know why he does it. Because for a while, he didn't feel safe. And now? He's starting to. As for me, I don't feel victorious. There's no triumph here. Just a fragile sort of peace. I don't know if she's really gone. Or if she's just waiting for the next family, the next boy to fix, the next mother to erase. But I do know this. If she ever comes near us again, I'll be ready. And she won't be.